The day I watched Derek Allen Bennett come apart in Raymond's conference room, I did not feel the rush of satisfaction I had anticipated. There was no triumph in my chest, no fire behind my eyes. What I felt, the only word I can find for it even now, was relief. The quiet, bone-deep relief of a man who has been carrying a weight in secret for 4 months and finally sets it down on solid ground. Derek sat across the mahogany table with his hands folded too tightly in his lap, the knuckles pale against his brown skin, his jaw clenched in that particular way he had whenever the world refused to go the way he planned. Raymond Elias Booker, my attorney of 22 years, and one of the finest legal minds to ever come out of Howard University School of Law, slid a manila folder across the table without saying a word. Derek looked at the folder the way a man looks at something he already knows will destroy him. "Thomas," Derek said, turning to me, his voice suddenly stripped of all the polish and confidence I had watched him perform for 8 years. "Thomas, I can explain." I looked at him for a long moment. Outside the window, Charlotte, North Carolina hummed with its usual Monday morning energy, the uptown skyline catching the January light, the traffic on Tryon Street moving slow and purposeful. I had built a life in this city, raised my daughter in this city, buried my wife in this city, and I had not come this far, 63 years of discipline, sacrifice, and quiet dignity, to be talked out of the truth by a man who used my own trust as a weapon. "Derek," I said, and I kept my voice low and even, the way my father taught me. "The time for explaining has passed. Before I tell you how we got to that room and what was inside that folder, let me ask you something. Drop down in the comments and tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? And if you believe that a man's character always finds its way to the surface, leave a like and subscribe. Because this story is about exactly that. Let's go back to where it started, 4 months ago. A Sunday afternoon in September that I will never forget for the rest of my life. My name is Thomas Edward Calloway. I am 63 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 31 years with the city of Charlotte designing infrastructure that still carries people home every single day. I live in the same house in the Myers Park neighborhood where I raised my daughter, Simone, a 4-bedroom colonial with a magnolia tree in the front yard that my late wife, Gloria, planted the year Simone was born. Gloria passed 8 years ago from pancreatic cancer. That is a grief I will carry until the day I leave this earth. But she left me with a daughter who has her mother's eyes and her grandmother's laugh. And for that, I am more grateful than I can put into words. Simone is 38 years old. She is a pediatric nurse practitioner at Atrium Health, the kind of woman who stops to help strangers, who calls me every Sunday without fail, who keeps fresh flowers on her mother's grave every single week. She married Derek Allen Bennett 6 years ago at First Baptist Church on Davidson Street, in a ceremony that had 300 people and a reception that went until midnight. I paid for that wedding, every last dollar of it. I did it proudly because I believed I was investing in my daughter's happiness. Derek is 41. He works, or rather worked, as a senior financial advisor at a mid-sized wealth management firm here in Charlotte. He's what people call impressive on paper. Good-looking in a calculated sort of way, always in a well-fitted suit, always with the right answer ready, always performing confidence. The way some men perform kindness, consistently enough to seem real, but hollow at the core when you look closely. And in 8 years of watching him, I have begun to look very closely indeed. I want to be fair. In the early years, Derek was good to Simone, or good enough. He remembered her birthday, kept the house clean, came to family dinners and complimented the food. But there were things, small things, the kind that don't show up in photographs that I filed away in the back of my mind the way an engineer files structural observations before a formal assessment. How he always forgot his wallet when we went out, but never when he was with his colleagues. How he had a habit of redirecting conversations about money towards Simone's income, her benefits package, her inheritance potential. How he asked me twice in 3 years about my estate planning and framed it each time as concern. I didn't say anything. Gloria always said I processed slow and responded deliberate, and she meant it as a compliment. I watched. I measured. I waited. Then came that Sunday in September. Simone had gone to her friend Kaisha's baby shower in Huntersville. Derek was supposed to be home all day. I came by around 2 o'clock because the gutters on the back of the house needed attention, and Derek had mentioned a week earlier that he hadn't gotten around to it. I still had a key. Simone had insisted on that after Gloria passed, said she needed to know I could get in if she wasn't there. I knocked twice. No answer. I called his cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I let myself in. The house was quiet in the way that means recently vacated. There was a half-finished cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, still faintly warm. On the dining room table, the same cherrywood table I had given them as a housewarming gift, Derek's laptop sat open, its screen still glowing. He had clearly stepped out in a hurry. Gone to the store, maybe. I wasn't looking at his screen. I was reaching past it to move a chair so I could get through to the back door, and that's when I saw it. The Gmail Compose window was open. The draft had no subject line. The recipient field showed a name I didn't recognize at first. Sunrise Gardens Senior Living. An email address ending in a .org domain. And the body of the message was partially written, the cursor blinking at the end of the last typed word like a small patient accusation. He won't last thee. That was all. 4 words and a dash. The sentence was unfinished. But I am an engineer. I understand load calculations. I understand the weight a single incomplete structure can carry. I stood there in my daughter's dining room for what felt like a very long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. My eyes read those 4 words again and again until the meaning of them assembled itself fully in my mind like a blueprint unfolding. He won't last the winter. He won't last the year. He won't last long enough to interfere. I pulled out my phone. I photographed the screen, the recipient, the partial text. The timestamp that showed the draft had been created 11 days prior. Then I set the chair back where it was, walked to the back door, assessed the gutters, and left before Derek returned. I sat in my car for 6 minutes in front of the house before I trusted myself to drive. I did not call Simone, not that day. I want you to understand what that restraint cost me. If you have a daughter, if you have anyone you love with the full weight of everything you are, you know that what I felt in that car was not anger. Anger is too simple a word. What I felt was the specific devastation of a man who has been proven right about something he desperately hoped he was wrong about. I had watched Derek for 8 years and seen the shape of something I couldn't yet name. And now I had seen it written in his own words in a Compose window on a Sunday afternoon. But I had 4 words and a dash. I did not yet have the full picture, and I had not spent 63 years cultivating patience just to throw it away in a moment of pain. Now let me ask you this. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted him right then and there, or would you have waited for the full truth? Tell me in the comments. And if this story is speaking to you, please subscribe and leave your like. It helps more than you know. The following Tuesday, I called Raymond Booker. Raymond and I have known each other since we were both 24 years old and standing in line at the Alpha Phi Alpha chapter interest meeting at UNC Charlotte. He became a lawyer. I became an engineer. We have been in each other's corners for nearly 4 decades. When Gloria got sick, Raymond handled every piece of paperwork without charging me $1. He's the kind of man that God gives you once if you are fortunate and pays attention. I met him for lunch at the Fig Tree restaurant on East Boulevard. a place we had been going to for 15 years. I showed him the photograph on my phone. Raymond studied it for a long time, his reading glasses low on his nose, his expression carefully neutral, in the way of a man who has seen too many things in courtrooms to allow himself the luxury of surprise. "This could be innocent," he said. "It could be," I agreed. "But you don't think it is?" "No," I said. "I don't." Raymond set my phone down on the white tablecloth and folded his hands. "Tell me everything you know about Derek's finances. And I mean everything, Thomas. Not impressions. Facts. What I knew was this. Derek had been with his firm, Cornerstone Wealth Management, for 9 years. His base salary, as best as I could estimate from conversations and lifestyle observations, was somewhere in the range of $180,000 to $220,000 annually. He and Simone had a joint account, and, I later learned, at least 2 accounts Derek maintained separately. I knew this because Simone had mentioned, almost offhandedly, 8 months earlier that Derek had suggested they maintain financial independence in their marriage. His words. She had thought it was progressive. I had thought it was careful. I also knew, because I had told him directly as a gesture of trust the year after Gloria died, that my estate, including the house in Myers Park, my retirement accounts at Truist Bank and Fidelity, and the life insurance policy that Gloria and I had maintained for 30 years, totaled just over $1.4 million. Raymond was quiet for a moment. "And Simone is your sole beneficiary?" "She is. And Derek would be her beneficiary in the event." "Yes." We looked at each other across the table. "I need 2 weeks," Raymond said. "Don't say a word to Simone. Don't change your behavior around Derek. Can you do that?" "I've been doing it for 8 years," I said. Raymond smiled for the first time that afternoon. "Then 2 more weeks shouldn't be a problem." Those 2 weeks were among the longest of my life. I attended Derek and Simone's anniversary dinner at Chez Francois on Providence, rode and watched my son-in-law order the $90 rebuy and tell a story about a client he had helped build a college fund for, a story delivered with such practiced warmth that the table laughed on cue. I watched Simone look at him with the trust that her mother had taught her to extend to the man she married. I smiled at the right moments. I asked the right questions. And underneath the dinner table, I pressed my thumb into my palm hard enough to leave a mark. Raymond called me on a Wednesday evening, 14 days after our lunch. He asked me to come to his office the following morning. What he had found, working with a financial investigator he trusted named Cassandra Webb, a former forensic accountant with the FBI field office in Charlotte, was more methodical and more calculated than even I had feared. Derek had, over the course of the previous 3 years, been quietly researching long-term care facilities in the Charlotte metropolitan area. Not for aging relatives. Both of his parents were deceased, and he had no living grandparents. The search history, which Cassandra had obtained through entirely legal channels via a civil records process I will not detail here, showed repeated visits to the websites of 5 different assisted living and memory care facilities, including Sunrise Gardens Senior Living, the very facility in the draft email I had photographed. More than that, Derek had, approximately 14 months prior, made contact with a financial planning specialist who operated in the gray area between legitimate elder care consulting and what Raymond described carefully as predatory asset management. This man, I will not use his name here, had a documented history of advising families on how to structure the finances of elderly relatives in ways that accelerated asset transfer to designated beneficiaries. But the piece that settled everything, the piece that turned my stomach even as it clarified every instinct I had carried for 8 years, was what Cassandra found in Derek's personal email archive, obtained through the civil process dating back 22 months. He had been in contact with a private elder law attorney in Raleigh. The subject line of one email read, "Capacity assessment, timeline, and process. Derek had been researching how to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I need you to sit with that for a moment because I had to. I am a man who designed load-bearing structures for 31 years. I understand the mechanics of how things collapse. But nothing in my professional life, nothing in my personal life, had prepared me for the specific horror of realizing that the man eating at my table, accepting my generosity, kissing my daughter in my presence, had been quietly building a legal and financial architecture designed to remove me from control of my own life and accelerate my death's financial benefit to him. He had not yet acted. The plan was in motion, but not complete. The email I had seen, "It won't last," was part of a communication he was preparing to send to Sunrise Gardens to inquire about placement availability. He was beginning to build the external record he would need. I drove home from Raymond's office that Thursday morning and sat in my car in the driveway of the house where I raised my daughter for a long time. The magnolia tree in the front yard was just beginning to turn with the season. Gloria had loved October. She used to say the trees in Myers Park in October looked like they were celebrating something. I thought about my daughter, about the way she had held my hand at her mother's funeral and whispered, "I've still got you, Daddy," about the way she trusted this man with the full, unguarded faith of a woman who had learned love from her mother. I was not going to destroy my daughter's world in a moment of anger. I was going to do this right. Karma isn't a hammer. Karma is an architect. It builds with patience and precision, and when it is done, what it constructs cannot be argued with. Raymond and I spent the next 6 weeks building the case with the precision of people who understood that speed is the enemy of justice. Cassandra compiled a documented timeline, every contact, every search, every email, into a report that was 37 pages long and sourced to verifiable records. Raymond made contact, through a colleague at the North Carolina State Bar, with the authorities relevant to Derek's professional licensing. A financial advisor who engages in activities that may constitute elder financial abuse does not simply face personal legal consequences. He faces the end of his career. We also did something that Derek had not anticipated, because it had not occurred to him that I was watching. We consulted with the administrator of Sunrise Gardens Senior Living directly, a woman named Patricia Okafor, a Nigerian-American woman in her late 50s who had run that facility for 16 years with a reputation for absolute integrity, agreed to meet with Raymond and, upon reviewing what we presented, confirmed that she had received a preliminary inquiry from a family member regarding placement availability for a 63-year-old male relative with early cognitive concerns. There were no early cognitive concerns. I had passed my annual physical at Novant Health 2 months prior, with results my doctor described as unremarkable in the best possible way. Patricia Okafor was appalled. She agreed to cooperate fully. There is a thing I should tell you about that period, those 6 weeks of quiet, deliberate work. It was not without its cost. I had dinner with Simone and Derek on 3 separate occasions. I went to their home for Sunday dinner twice. I watched Derek pour my coffee and ask about my health and suggest, once, with such practiced gentleness, it nearly broke me, that I might want to consider scaling back some of my home maintenance activities given my age. I looked at him across my daughter's kitchen and I said, "I appreciate the thought, Derek. I feel good. Better than ever, honestly." He smiled. I smiled back. A man who has waited all his life for the truth can wait a little longer. Now, I want to ask you something before we get to what happened in that conference room. If you had been carrying something this heavy for this long, who would you have called first? Leave it in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. We are almost to the moment everything changed. Raymond scheduled the meeting for a Monday morning in January. He called it a routine estate planning review, which was, in its way, entirely accurate. He sent the meeting invitation to Derek directly, citing my request for Derek's presence as my daughter's spouse and a key stakeholder in future family financial planning. Derek arrived 8 minutes early. I know this because Raymond texted me. He's here. He looks confident. Of course he did. He had been working toward this moment, or a version of it, for over 2 years. He believed he was walking into a room where an old man was about to hand him leverage. I arrived at 9 o'clock exactly. I wore the charcoal Brooks Brothers suit that Gloria had given me for our 25th wedding anniversary. I wanted to be wearing something she had touched. Cassandra Webb was already seated at the far end of the table. A representative from the North Carolina Secretary of State's Securities Division, who had been briefed on the matter as a courtesy prior to the formal referral, sat beside her. Raymond stood at the head of the table, composed and absolute. Derek looked at the room and I watched him recalculate. Watched the confidence shift to something more careful, more cautious. He looked at me. I held his gaze without expression. "Thomas," he said, and even then, even with everything assembled around him, he tried the familiar. "What is this?" Raymond spoke before I could. "Derek, please sit down. We have a number of things to discuss." The folder Raymond slid across the table contained 37 pages of documented evidence. It contained the email exchange with the Raleigh attorney about capacity assessments. It contained the communication records with the financial planning specialist. It contained the preliminary inquiry to Sunrise Gardens Senior Living, the one that had begun with the words, typed in Derek's own hand on a Sunday afternoon while my daughter was at her friend's baby shower. He won't last the full sentence, as it turned out. Ended. He won't last a year without proper care. We need to begin the transition planning as soon as possible. Derek stared at the folder for a long time. The room was very quiet. Outside, Charlotte went about its Monday. "Thomas," he said again, and this time his voice had lost everything. The warmth, the polish, the practiced authority. He sounded, for the first time in 8 years, like exactly what he was. "Thomas, I can explain. And I said what I told you I said." Low, even my father's voice. "Derek, the time for explaining has passed." The Securities Division representative spoke for approximately 20 minutes. Raymond spoke for another 10. Cassandra did not need to speak at all. Her document was thorough enough to speak for itself. Derek did not leave that conference room with his career intact. He did not leave it with any viable path to contesting what had been built against him. He left it with a referral to his firm's compliance office, a formal complaint filed with the North Carolina Secretary of State, and a clear understanding that my attorney had a complete record of every action he had taken and every action he had contemplated. He also left it knowing that his wife, my daughter, had not yet been told. That had been my decision, and Raymond had respected it. Simone was going to hear this from me, from her father, in the house where she grew up, at the kitchen table where we had eaten 10,000 meals together, where her mother had helped her with homework, and where I had told her, the night after Gloria died, that we were going to be all right. She deserved to hear it in a place that held love. I called Simone that Tuesday evening and asked her to come to dinner on Wednesday. Just the two of us. I made her mother's baked chicken with rice and gravy. The recipe Gloria kept in a worn index card in the recipe box on the kitchen counter. The one with Gloria's handwriting in blue ink. The one I can still barely look at without feeling the full weight of missing her. Simone came in at 6 o'clock in her scrubs, still carrying the day on her face. The particular exhaustion of a woman who spends her days caring for children who were sick and families who are frightened. She looked like her mother. She has always looked like her mother. We ate. We talked about her week, about a patient she was worried about whether I needed anything done around the house. And then, when the plates were cleared and the coffee was made, I sat down across from my daughter and I told her everything. I told her about the laptop, about the forwards and a dash. About Raymond and Cassandra, and 37 pages. About what Derek had been planning and how long he'd been planning it. I told her all of it, calmly and completely, and I laid every document on the kitchen table in front of her, the way you lay evidence in front of someone who deserves the full truth rather than a protected version of it. Simone listened without interrupting. She read the documents slowly. I watched her face move through recognition, disbelief, grief, anger, and something beyond anger that I do not have a precise name for. The specific devastation of a person who has loved someone fully and discovered that the love was not equally weighted. When she finished, she was quiet for a long time. The kitchen was warm. The magnolia tree was visible through the window, dark and still against the January night. "He was going to put you in a home, Daddy," she said. "He was planning to, yes. He was going to." She stopped, started again. "He was going to take everything. That appears to have been the intention." Another long silence. And then my daughter looked up at me with her mother's eyes and said something I was not prepared for, even after everything. "How long did you carry this alone?" "4 months," I said. She reached across the table and took my hand. And she held it the way she had held it at her mother's funeral, not with grief, but with the specific and unshakable grip of a woman who knows that some things you hold on to and some things you let go, and who has just become very clear about which is which. I will not dwell on what came after in extraordinary detail, because what came after was, in many ways, private. It belonged to Simone, and it was her healing to navigate on her own terms. What I will tell you is this. Derek Allen Bennett resigned from Cornerstone Wealth Management before he could be formally terminated. The North Carolina Secretary of State's Securities Division completed their review and issued a formal finding that was entered into the public record. His professional licenses were placed under review. The financial planning specialist he had consulted with became the subject of a separate inquiry. Simone filed for divorce 4 weeks after our Wednesday dinner. She did it from a position of complete legal preparation. Raymond connected her with a colleague, a family law specialist named Denise Harrington out of the University of North Carolina School of Law community, who was, Simone told me, the sharpest person she had ever sat across a table from. Derek did not contest the terms. Simone is living in a townhouse in Dilworth now, 6 minutes from my house. She comes for Sunday dinner every week. She brings flowers sometimes, and sometimes she just brings herself, and that is enough. We are rebuilding the ordinary rhythms of our lives with the specific gratitude of people who understand what almost happened and what did not. I am still in my house in Myers Park. The magnolia tree is still in the front yard. I am 63 years old and in excellent health. My doctor says so, and I have the paperwork to prove it. I take long walks in the morning through the neighborhood that Gloria and I chose together 30 years ago. I volunteer twice a week with a mentorship program for young men at the community center on South Boulevard. I am, by every honest measure, exactly where I am supposed to be. There is something I want to leave you with, because I believe you came here not just for a story, but for something that means something. I never hated Derek. I want to be clear about that. Hate is a weight I cannot afford to carry, and it is a weight I refuse to pass to my daughter. What Derek did came from something broken inside him, a fear of not having enough, a willingness to treat people as instruments rather than as human beings worthy of respect and care. That is his burden, not mine. What I know, what 63 years and the wisdom of a woman I loved for 31 of them taught me, is that character does not lie. It may be patient. It may wear a good suit and remember birthdays and pour your coffee with a smile, but it does not lie. Not forever. Not when the right set of eyes is watching. I was not saved by luck. I was saved by a habit of attention, by a patience that refused to act on instinct before the full truth was assembled, by the relationships I had spent a lifetime building. Raymond, Cassandra, Patricia Okafor, Every person who showed up in that conference room and in the months before it, because I had, at some point, shown up for them. My father used to say, "Build things that last, son. Whether it's a bridge or a marriage or a reputation, build things that last." He was talking about engineering, but he was also talking about everything else. I understood that then. I understand it more completely now. Simone asked me, a few weeks ago, whether I was angry. Not at Derek specifically, but at the 8 years of Sunday dinners and anniversary toasts and holiday photographs where I had been, in some sense, watching and waiting while the man across the table was building something designed to harm me. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. I told her, I am not angry at the years. The years gave me the evidence. The years gave me the precision. And the years gave me this, the clear, unobstructed view of who you are, Simone, of the woman you have become, of the mother your mother would be so proud of. She cried a little at that. I let her. Then I handed her a paper towel because we have never been a household of delicate things, and she laughed, and the kitchen was warm, and the magnolia tree was in the yard, and Gloria was everywhere she has always been in the recipe box, in my daughter's eyes, in the particular quality of light on a winter evening in the home we built together. The truth does not have a deadline. It has a destination, and it always arrives. Thank you. Truly from the bottom of my heart, for spending this time with me today. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you to pay attention to the people who are supposed to protect you, please share it with someone you love. Subscribe to this channel and leave your like. It is the simplest way to tell me you value what we are building here together. We'll see each other in the next one.